Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. First we're going to start with the Zaporizhzhia area. The previous night, the Russians made massive missile attack against the ammo depot in the south of Zaporizhzhia. As you can see, this is the results of that attack. The Russians were using Iskander for those purposes, and as a result, as you can see, the Russians managed to deal a lot of damage, and the destroyed ammo depot in the south that Ukrainians were using to supply and support their forces of 71st Jaeger Brigade and the force of 117th, 16th and probably 128th Mountain Assault Brigade. The Ukrainians continue attacking and pushing the Russians in the vicinity of Zherebyanki, but for now they still haven't received any result in those operations. Very interesting updates were published videos were published by the Ukrainians. It's very interesting videos, and we're going to watch them. For example, this video, during the previous days, the Ukrainians managed to destroy at least 2 artillery systems of the Russian Federation, and it's very interesting. As you can see in this video, the Russians have deployed their Uragan system. The Ukrainians managed to discover, to track that system, and to destroy that artillery system using 1 missile, or probably 2 missiles. After 2 explosions, there was a fire on this system, and after that, the system was destroyed. And the same video, another video, how the Ukrainians destroy Russian artillery system, took place a little bit to the north in the small settlement Chistopolye. On this video we see how the Russians were trying to load the artillery system using missiles. That was another Uragan or Grad system. The Ukrainians managed to discover this artillery system, and also using 1 missile destroyed with 1 shot. As you can see, the Ukrainians are very accurate with their attacks, and as we can see, they're pretty successful. The main things that Ukrainians are trying to achieve is to suppress the Russian artillery on the south of Petykhatki and Robotina, and after that to restore their offensive operation. I have a little bit updated the map showing that the Ukrainians control the fields on the south of Novodanilovka. This one, the Ukrainians continue sending more and more reserves to the combat line in the north of Robotina, and the Russians continue bombing and shelling the Ukrainians on the way. And today the Russians published another video. This video is geolocated how the Ukrainians were trying to redeploy their forces to the south. The Russians managed to discover them, to track them, and after like a moment they start bombing and shelling these positions. Anyway, this video confirms that no matter that some Russian sources reported that the Russians managed to restore positions on the north of Robotina, for now we still see that Ukrainians still controls this defense line. So basically the first defense belt in the north of Robotina. Now we are moving further to Vremyevka tactical bridgehead. The Ukrainians during the previous night made few attempts to attack Russian positions Staromayorsk and Peryutina using reconnaissance teams and small light offensive teams, but all those attacks were repelled. Very interesting updates are coming from the Vuhledar direction. There at least during the previous night we got at least 3 pieces of news. First interesting came today from Vuhledar, just another geolocated video showing how the Russians during the previous day were trying to attack the Ukrainian armored vehicles somewhere between the streets of this settlement. The Russians used at least 3 drones for that purposes, and I understand after the 3rd attack they managed to burn and to set on fire this armored vehicle, and after that, of course, this armored vehicle was destroyed. And currently the Ukrainians, I believe, are no longer able to use this. Maybe they will move this to the back for repairing, for services and something like this. Very interesting updates are coming from Novosilka. If you remember, we discussed that during the previous days the Russians made a lot of attempts to attack Ukrainian positions in the vicinity of these forest lines. They were trying to develop their bridgehead as close as possible to Novosilka, but the Ukrainians managed to move some reserves in this area, and the Ukrainians launched their own counter-attack in this area, and as a result of Ukrainian counter-attack they managed to return control over these trenches. At least some Russian military experts are saying that Ukrainians did return the control over these trenches, and the Russians were forced to step back. So we will adjust the map before the next video. Also, the Russians published the video how they were trying to pin down and to slow down the Ukrainians, not to allow them to be flexible and powerful during those counter-offensive operations. On this video we see the destroying of another Ukrainian ammo depot somewhere between the forest trees in this settlement. But as we see, all these events, all these actions didn't help the Russians to hold this bridgehead, and basically they were forced to step back. But this settlement changed just during this year. This settlement changed the owner maybe for 3 or 4 times. So I won't be surprised if the Russians will make their own counter-attack and will return control over these trenches within a few days or something like this. Also, the Russians published a very interesting video behind the Novosilka. They were bombing and shelling the forces of 59th Motorized Brigade among the fields. They managed to discover and to spot one Ukrainian fortification stronghold among the fields. This video is geolocated, and they were trying to pin down to destroy Ukrainian ammo depots that Ukrainians were using for supplying and supporting their forces in Novosilka. We haven't received any numbers of results of those attacks, but according to these 2 videos that were published by the Russians, we see that maybe the Russians managed to destroy a few trenches, maybe a few ammo depots and a few armored vehicles. As you can see, they were trying to target this area heavily. But one more thing, no updates, no numbers about the results of those attacks. Now we're moving further to Klishchevka area. The Russians reported that as a result of counter-offensive that they launched in the vicinity of Klishchevka, they managed to return every single hill in the vicinity of the settlement, and they were able to push the Ukrainians to step back towards the forest line. For now, we also haven't received any video confirmations of that. The only thing that we got came from Ukrainian side. They are showing how they were bombing some Russian infantry who was moving between 2 settlements, Kurdyumovka and the settlement Zaryanovka, this one, and nothing special, just another geolocation confirming that these forest lines are under Russian control. The Russians also claims that during the previous night they launched a counter-offensive operation on the northern flank. The Russians were attacking the Ukrainians in the vicinity between Berkhovka and Yahidne. The Russians were trying to develop their bridgehead and to improve their positions on Dubovo-Vasilievka salient. Also, the Russians published the video of bombing and shelling of the Ukrainian forces on the northern flank. This area, the source of this video told us that said that this video came from the northern flank. I was trying to find the real geolocation, but currently this video is not geolocated for 100%. I just put this mark softly, and this event took place somewhere in the northern flank, maybe a little bit to the left, to the right, we'll see. But we see that the Russians continue a counter-offensive operation, continue repelling Ukrainian attack. And of course, to achieve as the best results, they need to, first of all, to suppress the Ukrainian artillery and their support and their warehouses among the forest lines. And there were no updates during the previous night from Siversk or Liman bridgeheads, and interesting updates are coming from Novosilka. The Ukrainians, after a few days of fierce fightings, were forced to step back and to leave most of the part of Novosilka, and we discussed yesterday that this settlement was under became under complete Russian control. But during the previous night, the Ukrainians managed to regroup in the vicinity on the line between Stelmachovka and Berestova, and the Ukrainians sent the reserves of 32nd Mechanized Brigades to counter-attack in Novosilka. As a result of those actions, the Russians were forced to step back to the eastern part of the settlement. The Russians saved control over the southern forest lines. The only thing that the Russians were forced to step back from is the two or three streets on the western edge of the settlement. So basically, as I understand currently, this area is in the gray zone. But it doesn't mean that Ukrainians are able to return control of these areas under complete fire control from both sides. So basically the Russians step back towards more reliable positions until they are able to repel another Ukrainian attack, and after that I believe they will counter-attack and move further in the direction of Stelmachovka and Berestova. Very interesting updates are coming from Kupiansk. The sources are saying that the local authorities announced complete evacuation of Kupiansk, and mainly this order is about for evacuation of the local authorities and documentation, bank systems, post office, and so on. And I believe that the locals are not going to evacuate because there are no way to evacuate from this settlement. I believe we'll try to wait for the Russians or something like this. So basically this is another confirmation, another evidence that the Ukrainians do have information, intelligence information, that soon the Russians will start storming this settlement. And that's it for this short video. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.